Welcome. Today we have Terri Britt, former Miss USA, a spiritual coach, intuitive healer, TEDx speaker, and founder of the Women Leaders of Love global community. She is the author of several books, including the award-winning The Enlightened Mom, A Mother's Guide for Bringing Peace, Light, Love, and Light to Your Family's Life. Terri is a wife, mom, stepmom, nana, and former TV host of Movie Time, now known as E! Channel. Terri's mission is to guide women off the hamster wheel of competition, stress, and emotional chaos, helping them thrive so their families can watch them and learn. Welcome, Terri.
Thank you. Every time I hear that, I think, gosh, it just kind of settles into your mission a little bit more. You just feel it a little bit deeper every time you hear, yes, that is my mission. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes, I know what you mean. It's like, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, my first question that I ask everyone is, what does enlightenment mean to you?
It means being in alignment. It means choosing to honor and love the way you were created and aligning with God.
Yes, alignment is so important. And when we do find that our true purpose, our authentic self, and we really allow ourselves to embody and align with that I feel is when the universe befriends us in a way and
That's
starts to we start to work with it instead of against it, right?
Yeah. What I have found over the years is that as I have walked a path of enlightenment, and I have moments where I'm really enlightened and other moments where I'm not. I think we're all that way. But as I have chosen to walk that path, it has been so beautiful to make choices that are from the soul rather than from ego. And even with my husband, I'm married now to my husband, Charlie. We got married 15 years ago. We were both widows, and he came into my life right after my husband died. And so we got married, but at our wedding, we committed to being an enlightened family, an enlightened couple, because we had kids that we had to blend in high school. So it was that commitment that we were walking a path of choosing to learn, to grow, to expand, instead of being in blame with each other, to choose to honor each other and how we were created. And if we got triggered, to love ourselves, and go in and heal so that we moved deeper into enlightenment. So my company, my actual company, my community is called Women Leaders of Love, but my company is called Enlightened Family Institute. And it really is with the mission of seeing our families as a soul group so that we can learn from each other and move into alignment, so that it's almost like husband and wife. It doesn't matter which side, but okay, husband and wife. But for us, it's as we move into alignment and become or stand in our truth, not become because we already are, but as we take off the layers, it's almost like you create a triangle. It's like we come in to alignment and oneness with God. And it has been magical. I did this with my late husband. We were married for 17 years. We didn't start out that way, but as I started to shift my life, he followed suit. And then when he died after 17 years of marriage, Charlie showed up. I didn't know if he would be willing to take this ride with me, but as he saw how healthy it was and how healthy the relationships were with my kids, he wanted part of it. So it's been a magical ride. It's been over, I guess, 30 years of really working towards that connectedness.
It's wonderful to bring it into the family realm because so often we go off on these journeys by ourselves and we don't really have support around us because we don't have other people that are going through it necessarily at the same time. All of our divine timing is different. And so it's wonderful to incorporate that in your teachings. Tell the audience a little bit more about your spiritual enlightenment journey, your journey to awakening, kind of if there was a pivotal moment or just key spots along the way, and if
Oh,
the role
well.
that dreams played in that.
So I guess, there are a lot of little spots. Miss USA comes into this is because I had always been on the hamster wheel of trying to prove my worth, trying to win love, which I saw in my family. My mom and dad did it. They denied themselves. They tried to be the best parents, and my dad became an alcoholic. Okay. So it kind of tells you it doesn't work. My mother was depressed. So I didn't understand it back then, but I said, well, I want to be like my dad. At least he's not depressed. And this was before he became an alcoholic. So I started, working really hard, being out in the world, trying to win, be the best. I was miserable. I went to school on a scholarship in college. And at the second semester of my sophomore year, I just said, I can't do this anymore. I left school and on a whim, a few months later, entered into Miss Arkansas. Well, I won. 2 weeks after that, I get sent to Miss USA. No training, no nothing, short brown hair, and I get on stage and make the top 12, and Bob Barker says, "What do you do in Cabot, Arkansas on a Saturday night?" And I said, "Well, Bob, in the winter, we stay at home." I was in a Southern accent. And in the summer, we go down to the Tasty Freeze, sit on the back of my friend's truck. He plays the banjo, and the guys drink a little beer and dip a little skull. It's a real good time. And I won. So that was a huge pivotal point because I learned something from that. It would take a long time. It was like a seed that was planted, but it took a long time to germinate. But it said that when you listen to your heart and stand in your truth, miracles show up. I left school. I didn't do like everyone else was doing. And I listened to my heart. I stood in my truth on that stage, talked about drinking beer and dipping skull, and then a miracle showed up. I won. But I didn't really understand it. I didn't understand it until years later when I became a wife and mom, and I was miserable. I started denying myself and trying to be the best mom I could be. And I knew I was perpetuating a cycle for my family. Well, a big awakening happened when my dad died in 95. And through those years, he had become an alcoholic. He'd lost everything in bankruptcy, really drank himself, and not to death because cancer is what killed him, but lung cancer, but it pretty much killed him. He had been a hermit the last 10 years of his life. And I remember in the moment that it was a few days before he died. I remember he dropped a glass and just sank to a chair. I knew we were coming to the end. And I looked at him and I said, "Daddy, you can't leave. You can't leave. You've always been my buddy, my ally." I mean, I used all these emotions coming out. And he looked at me as if he were in shock. It was like his eyes bugged out. And I was like, he didn't even know that he was loved. He had buried himself in so much judgment and failure and feelings of like he had had great success and then lost everything. I mean, it was just it was awful. So I knew right then that I had to make a shift. I had to do something differently because I was not going to be an alcoholic because I would have never allowed myself to go there. But my children were going to watch me just like I had watched my dad. And I wanted to be something different for them. I didn't want to be angry. I was always angry. So I got into meditation and at a healing school, and my whole world opened up. I mean, it was my therapist. I'd been in therapy. She said, "You need to get into meditation." Well, all of a sudden, as soon as I made that decision, my world opened up. I was invited to a psychic school the first night in class, just running energy, learning how to meditate. I see a spirit go across the room, and I'm like, it just got like cracked me open. And so that was the beginning of the journey. But I'll never forget. I had gone on a spiritual retreat in San Francisco, and I came home and I started losing everything that I had been connected to there. I mean, I felt so connected to spirit. I felt so just, I don't know. It was amazing. I came home and I was gradually losing it. Well, I had a dream one night, and the dream was that I was in a building. It was almost like a community center, and there was a guy standing at a podium, and he calls my name. He said, "You're going with Soul to San Francisco." Well, San Francisco is just where I'd returned from, right? I was so excited that I was going on this adventure. Then I turned around and I see my mother. I knew in that moment I couldn't go on that adventure, that I had this picture in my mind that I couldn't go. So when I woke up, I was like, what does this mean? Well, San Francisco was that spiritual journey, right? Soul was it was like SOUL. In my mind, in the dream, it was SOL, like soul. And it was telling me that I was not allowing myself to go on the adventure because of the mother wound, of not loving myself because of what I thought a mother should be. So I made a decision in that moment. I meditated, and one of the things that I had learned, this was many years ago. This was back in the 90s, I guess, late 90s, early 2000. I can't remember the dates. But I had taken a class in San Francisco with Cheryl Richardson, who had a big book at that time called Make Time for Your Life. So I sat down in meditation after that dream and said, what do I want? What are the top 5 things that are most important to me? And I made a list. Well, what was interesting that wasn't on the list was that I had a business that I subletted from this woman that I could go in and do spiritual counseling. I just rented her space part of the week and she did it. It was not on the list. And I thought, I've got a contract. What do I do? I called her that day, Megan, and said, this is what's happened for me. And I'm wondering if I can get out of the lease. She says, oh, you're not going to believe this. Someone just called today wanting to sublet. And so I got out of the lease that day. I quit doing my spiritual counseling at that time. And 2 weeks later, I was meditating on unconditional love when all of a sudden little Terri, the little girl inside of me, showed up. And I had never seen her in meditation, never done anything. And as I'm sitting there crying, I hear in my ear, get up and write this. This is the beginning of your book. So I got up, and that was the beginning of my first book, Message Sent. And it was a journal. It's not great writing. It's just a journal that I ended up putting, taking the dates off and putting names on each story, almost like a chicken soup for the soul. But that is where I've allowed myself to go through the years, is to allow my intuition, my dreams, and to continue my journey of helping women heal and love themselves so that they break the cycle of lack, stress, and struggle for their families.
That's an amazing story, and there's so many parallels too. I I want to say first at the very beginning about the Miss USA story. The reason I feel that you were recognized in that moment is authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And you weren't saying what you were supposed to say, the
No.
typical platform speech, the politically correct, thing. You just were being yourself unabashingly. And I feel like that is what was so different, right? So
Yeah.
unusual. And that's really what we're called to do here,
Yes.
is find what our authentic self is
Mm-hmm.
and embrace it without fear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, meditation has been a huge vehicle for me in that way as well.
Yeah.
And it's so intertwined with the dream world because of the theta state. And it does allow us to strip that ego away and surrender to receive direction. And when we start to allow that direction, then the universe starts rearranging itself
Mm-hmm.
so that we can continue on that path. So your trajectory from where you were to where you are and how you got there, it's a beautiful example of how wonderful the universe can kind of contrive to help us when we actually say, okay, I know I'm not going to be what I was thought I was supposed to be, what everyone else thinks I'm supposed to be. I'm going to allow for that information to flow down to me about what I'm really here for, and see where it takes me.
Yes, absolutely. I remember as a little girl, standing out in my driveway. I was in elementary school, probably second or third grade, I don't know. And I remember feeling like someone was up in the sky looking down on me, watching me, but I didn't know how to access that. It felt like a group of people, and I didn't know how to access them. And then it was around the same time I had gone over to my neighbor's house, because back then they'd let you run across the street and you didn't worry about, anything. So I went over to my neighbor's house to play. Nobody was home. I just remember there was no cars on the street. There were no birds. It was just dead quiet. And I sat on my neighbor's yard and can remember saying to myself, I'm all alone in this world. And I made a decision in that moment that became my filter. I am all alone. So one of the things that I recognized over the years in my living on the hamster wheel and trying to do it like my dad did, and always trying to be the best, was I did not want to be alone. I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to feel connected, but I always did it alone. I had my defenses up. I had walls around me. And it was through when I started meditating and then started studying energy that those walls began to come down. I can even remember feeling like I had a wall around me and recognizing it and saying, oh, I have the power to shift that, and visualized a button and pushing the button so the wall could come down, and made that a practice that anytime I felt like my defenses were up, my walls were up, I would just intentionally see that button and push it and bring them down and let myself relax. That was a huge turning point for me. But here was another one. So I was raised not heavily in the church, but in a religious, like a strong faith. But I never felt I could have a connection with God. It was scary to me. This beautiful, I mean, back then it was a man on a throne, right? When I was a kid.
Mhm.
So through this process of learning to love myself and really what I call raising my worthiness quotient, treating myself as if I mattered, treating myself as if I was worthy of being seen, heard, and valued, that I started to feel a deeper connection. But before all that happened, right after I started doing energy work, I was trying to remember the timing on this the other day, I had a dream. And it was my daughter, who's now 32, she was maybe 4 or 5. And she had come into the bedroom. This is actually what happened. She came into my bedroom trying to get in bed, and I'm like, no, I'm going to take you back to your bedroom. So I walked her back to her bedroom, but I crawled in bed with her and I fell asleep. Well, in my state of sleep, I had a dream where I had gone back to my bedroom, and we had a little marble threshold that separated our bedroom from the hallway. And in my dream, I fell over the threshold. Now we had a 7,000 square foot home. And so our bedroom suite was 1,200 square feet. So it was this massive bedroom. And when you walk into the door it was French window, fireplace, French window, another French window, French doors that went out, and so it was all this glass. When I fall over the threshold, I look in the corner and there is a Christmas tree that is not decorated. And underneath it is red felt, okay, like a red Christmas tree felt. And underneath that, it's moving, and it scares me. In my dream, I run to my bed, and all of a sudden it's dark, but there's just a light coming down. And out from under that red felt comes a man running at me. And he looks like Dick Tracy. He's got on the trench coat, he's got on the fedora hat, the fedora hat. And I'm looking at him, and then I see him in his face, and I went, oh, it's you. And there's this familiarity. So I thought, well, maybe that's my at that time was Michael that I was working with. Well, he then goes over to the glass in my dream, and the curtains, opens them up. Well, not only does those windows open up, but it was all the way around, and even the fireplace disappeared. And as I looked out, there was a carnival, bright, fun, bright, festive carnival. And he said to me as he's opening up the windows, I'm here to tell you about Jesus. And I'm like, what? Because I had pulled so far away from the church and the dogma that I had been raised in, hellfire and brimstone, right? And so I looked at it and I was like, what? I woke up and I'm like, what was that about? I don't really understand this. And what it was that over the years, what I learned to understand is that the Christ consciousness is like a carnival. It is fun. It is playful. It is alive. It is There's no emotional chaos. I don't know if you like carnivals, but if you like carnivals, you know what I'm talking about. It's being childlike with wonder. And so I didn't understand it back then, but over the years, what I've come to understand is I feel now the presence of all of these guides. I'll be journaling every day, and Christ comes in and he says, "Dear sister." Mother Mary comes in, "Dear child." Michael the archangel comes in, my sweet friend, or whatever, because they all have a way of talking to me. And I'm so grateful that, one, I committed to loving myself unconditionally, and two, I've learned about energy and creating a connection, and three, that I've let my family be my guide. That when I've reacted to them, especially my kids, when you're trying to control them or trying to do anything, that there's something hurting inside of you, that you're out of alignment. So I use them as an opportunity to say, well, if I'm reacting or controlling you, then I need to go within and see what's hurting the little girl inside of me. I need to ask little Terri what's hurting and become the divine parent to her. Well, as I did that, then I felt worthy. I raised my worthiness quotient. And so this connection has deepened so that life is not a hamster wheel anymore. I know that I can take my time. I can go into meditation. I can ask for guidance, and information's going to come through. If it doesn't come through right in that moment, it's probably because it's not divine timing. So what's happened for me over the years on this journey, where I used to be a control freak, is I live for most of the time now in a state of trust. And so you asked at the beginning, what is my idea of enlightenment? I guess the ultimate word would be trust. It would be in a state of surrender and trust, allowing the universe to support me, to be connected, to feel loved and nurtured, no matter what's going on in the world around me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's wonderful. And I think there's so many ways that we can tap into the spirit guides and our own higher self and the universal mind
Mhm.
that ourselves. And I think that I've had this conversation other times on this podcast about the religious dogma, and that really is, you can't get there from here. There has
Mhm.
to be a conduit. You have to work through someone else who's approved to be able to access that. And I think that kind of dulls our ability to tap into our intuition. It squelches our agency to feel ourselves as spiritual beings and our capability. And it really just limits us
Mhm.
spiritually when we get trapped in that. And
Right.
so to look at the larger implications of our existence and allow there to be other possibilities and allow there to be other ways to connect is really where we become so much more in alignment, so much more in abundance, and so much more in harmony versus working against it. And I mean,
Absolutely.
easier said than done, but I think that's really, for me, dreams are so filled with guidance and
Mm.
so mysterious, but yet personal in a way that it's really why I want to help other women tap into that, because it's there for you, and it's everybody has that ability
Mhm.
to access that higher knowledge themselves with
Absolutely.
so
Yeah, one of my favorite dreams. So one of the things that came up for me as I started walking this path is being burned at the stake in a past life. I mean, it was when I was in my training in the 90s. I was at a psychic school we were learning to read other people, when all of a sudden my teacher's yelling at me, get out of the picture. And when I came out of the picture, I was like this. I mean, I was reliving being burned at the stake. It was awful. And that triggered something inside of me that was very scary for me to share, that I was an intuitive, that I was a healer. Uh, Living in Southern California for years, it was okay. And then I moved back to the South where I had been raised, and it was scary because I thought there's a lot of judgment, around those abilities, those gifts. So it was scary for me. I found myself shutting down. I mean, I literally blocked abundance from coming in because of that. It was like I was chiseling at it, chiseling at it, chiseling at it. And I'll never forget, as I had really made some headway, this was back in like 2017. I was asking, okay, so what's next? Well, I had a dream, and I woke up in the morning and I had had this vision. It was a picture on the wall. It had a frame around it, and it said 7 radio show. So 7 to me was about trust. And then the radio show was, I looked it up and it was like, okay, it can be your voice, giving yourself a voice, or it can be actually doing a radio show. And I thought to myself, well, I would be interested in doing a radio show. I used to be a news anchor for what's now the E channel, and that's really right up my forte. So cool, I can do that. Well, I started looking around that day, and well, the first thing was, before I did that, I looked at the frame, because I'm always looking at each little aspect of things. I'm like, what does that frame mean?
Yes.
And the frame was telling me that I had limits. I was limiting myself. What were the limits? So I checked in with myself, and it was religious programming again, afraid of being persecuted. I had a real
Yeah.
fear
Oh,
of
yeah.
being killed in this lifetime. That sounds ludicrous,
No,
but I
it
did.
doesn't.
I did. I just was, oh my gosh. And so anyway, I'm just looking on the internet that day and looking at different radio shows. Didn't reach out to anyone, didn't sign up for anything. But I had zeroed in my mind, if I were going to do one, I would do it on this network. Well, that evening, I get an email from the owner of that network, who I've never met, didn't have any connection with. And he said, have you ever considered doing a radio show?
Mm,
So that was my cosmic 2x4, you know?
yes.
And so it was a podcast, but, called it a radio show. But anyway, so I ended up doing it for 2 years, had amazing guests on, loved every minute of it, and really found myself following the guidance of giving myself more of a voice every time, and sharing more of who I am, sharing that I was an intuitive, just doing that. So it was a way for me to start really breaking the ice. And even though I'd been teaching for years, this was on a bigger scale. Okay. This wasn't just in a group that somebody had me come in and speak. This was like, okay, anybody can listen to this. This is on the internet. Okay. Somebody out there may be ready with that torch. I didn't know.
Right.
So, it was a big shift for me. So again, there was another dream that was giving me guidance on what was next. And as soon as I listened to it, and what was interesting, I forgot to tell you this part, the frame, was religious stuff. That day on social media, I had written something, and somebody started blasting me about working with the devil.
Mm,
And I just looked at it and I said, thank you for the gift, because I didn't get triggered. I was like, yes, I can do this. And so the frame was gone off of the picture on the wall. And that's when the guy reached out to me to do the show. And at first I
uh,
hem-hawed, and he said, I had already told him when he reached out to me, and then we got on the phone, I told him about the dream. So I was kind of hem-hawing, do I really want to commit to this or whatever? And he says, you're going to hem-haw and you had that dream? Are you crazy? I'm like, you're right. Let's do this. So, but yeah, it was a game changer for me. It really helped me open up to share my voice and my truth on a deeper level.
Yes, absolutely. And I've had that same experience, but I've never even listened to podcasts before creating my own, if you can believe that. And when I was called by spirit to do it, I was kind of like, no way, because
Yeah.
I don't even know the first thing about it. And I'm not about to tell my truth. And who do I know to come on? And I just everything was I thought, no way.
Yeah.
And you are not the first person that I've had on that has the quote unquote witch wound. I think we all do. I feel like everybody
Yeah.
that's called to this path has it, because it's not their first go around, and they have brought with them that fear and that caution, knowing, well, there's a reason we're keeping this quiet and we better be careful.
Well, you know what?
And
Oh,
yeah.
sorry. What's your
Well,
Go
it's
ahead.
not just conjecture, as you were saying. I mean, there's still some laws on the books. There's still parts of the country or the world where it's not okay. And so it's not just in our minds, but
No.
it is important that we all come together and support each other to really transmute that.
Well, and I also, I've done a lot of reading on it too, is that whether we've been in a past life there, it was part of our culture. And that's why they say now somebody's going on a witch hunt, right? I mean, because it is so prevalent in our culture. Now, this is interesting. Okay, this happened the other day, because this has been a chipping away over the years, and I've actually seen the past life. I've seen the people. I've forgiven them. I mean, it was huge. But I was at Barnes and Noble. This was during my birthday recently, and my husband and I were camping, so we went over to Barnes and Noble because it was raining. Sitting there having a hot chocolate, and I look across. If you've ever been to one of their bookstores, they have a coffee house right in the bookstore. So I look across, and there's an end cap, and the book is called "The Killing of the Witches," I think is what it was called, by Bill O'Reilly, who is a big newscaster and journalist here. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is that about? So I get my hot chocolate and I go over there and I start plowing through this book. And the essence of it was this, which was really fascinating. What it was saying in the Salem witch trials here in the States, and that's not where I was killed, but that's what happened in the States. Um, the the gift that came from it was that it created the First Amendment in our Constitution, which said you could have freedom of religion, freedom of speech. And so, we often look at, well, those things were so horrific, and they were horrific. But when we can look at, okay, if that person was in spiritual agreement to help evolve humanity, then what they did is they helped us evolve into freedom of religion in our country. And this is what the essence of what the book was saying. I thought, holy cow, because I'm always asking, no matter how bad something is, what's the gift in it? I was molested in high school. I can now say, what was the gift in it? What was the spiritual agreement? And really learn from it and feel empowered in it. So why would that be any different? Why would that be any different? So when we look at it and we go, okay, so that helped bring the First Amendment here in the United States. So what is it that we as women who, whether we had a past life in it, or we have it just carried through the women in our family down through the generations because it was scary, right? You don't do anything, you might be burned at the stake. That's scary. What if now, in our own way, instead of the persecution, we're showing a different way that we are in our truths, we are in our enlightenment, so that, as I was saying earlier, that we break the cycle. We break the cycle for our families. And it's so interesting because I just had an experience. I come from a line of witches. None of them own it, but my mother's intuitive. My grandmother was intuitive. My cousins are intuitive. I mean, everybody is intuitive. They're all healers, but no one really honors it. But I was sitting with my mom, my aunt, my cousin, and myself, and I started looking at this going, holy crap. These women have never had permission to be in their gifts, right? Because that's what our culture says. And to be able to look at it and see how much it's needed, because at the core, I think most of us as women have our intuitive abilities. I believe we all do, but I think most women, if we would take the time to love ourselves and nurture ourselves and really move into alignment and walk an enlightened path, we change everything. We change it I mean, I know I've watched both of my husbands, my late husband and my husband now, as I have healed and tapped into my intuition, they both shifted and walked on and stepped onto a spiritual path. So I believe this is the power we have as women. So whether you call it being a witch or you just call it being a healer and an
Mhm.
intuitive, it doesn't matter. We have this gift and we just need to all claim it.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And
Mhm.
I'm so glad to have this conversation with you today because I feel it's so important for everyone to hear again and again and again, so that they feel empowered to do the
Mhm.
same.
Mhm. Yeah. Don't you find, Megan, that a lot of people are afraid because they're afraid they're going to lose their family's love? And at least this is what I see, because this is my journey, that women oftentimes are afraid to stand in their truths and be in that intuitive wisdom because it might be different than the family. They're not going to conform anymore. I just, I see that, and if I, what I try to tell them is, listen, when you stand in your truth and your wisdom, and you listen to your intuition, and you listen to that as inspired guidance, which is from spirit, right? And you move into a place of truth and alignment. For me, that's putting God first. That's putting this beautiful, all loving essence of God that we are all a part of. We all make up the body of God. That is putting God first. God is love. And so for so many people who were brought up in religion, they think that putting God first is putting yourself last, especially with your family. And so they won't tap into these gifts. They won't listen to their dreams. They won't listen to their intuition. But if they can see, okay, but if I do this, I am tapping into the miracles. I'm tapping into that God essence. And that is the greatest gift I can give my family. That's the greatest gift I can give my children, my spouse, even my parents, my mother. To watch her watch me is so cool. She's 81 years old, but I know she's watching me and I know she's learning because I see it. And I see her starting to evolve a little bit more and talk a little bit more. And I think, wow, if I can give her that gift before she dies, probably in the next 10 or 15 years, I don't know. What a gift, huh? Breaking
Hmm.
the cycle.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, wonderful. Well, I want you to speak really quickly about the worthiness quotient free
Oh, okay.
quiz that
Okay.
we're going to offer the listeners.
Yeah.
So tell them just a little bit about that, and the link will be in the show notes.
Sure. So the worthiness quotient, as I had mentioned earlier, is about how open you are to receiving love, nurturing, and support simply for being you. That means walking a path of enlightenment, no more performing. And it's based in your vibration. So a lot of times we think, well, I've owned my worth, but yet our outer world is telling us otherwise. It makes us feel like, okay, well, I'm not being heard, I'm not being seen, I'm not being valued. And maybe there are different areas. Maybe in your work world, you feel good, but at home in your relationship, it's not working at all. So the quiz is broken down into 8 sections, and it covers your passions, it covers your health, it covers miracles, it covers all of it for you to really tap in and say, how do I feel about this? What is, am I really living in my truth here? And then at the end, what we do is we send you a personalized report that tells you about each of those sections and then your overall worthiness quotient. And so it gives you a reading of, am I open to receiving? Am I treating myself as if I'm worthy? Have I given myself a voice? Am I still living by beliefs that tell me I have to perform for love? Or am I truly putting God first by listening here? And by doing that, and then we give some steps to start raising your worthiness quotient. And it's pretty much everything that I've been doing through the years about really loving myself, shifting, paying attention to the signs, loving that, being the divine parent to that little girl inside of me. So it's funny because I have people tell me, "Oh my gosh, I took it." And some will say, I was so excited to see how good it was. And then others might say, oh, I've got a lot of work to do. But what's really interesting is when they come back, oftentimes after they've taken my worthiness quotient course or whatever, they'll come back 6 months later and go, oh my gosh, I took the quiz again and my worthiness quotient is shot up, which is so cool because then they're getting to see their outer world mirror their inner abundance. And that's really what it is. It's just really making shifts letting go of shame and guilt around so many different areas of our life, which keep us at a low worthiness quotient, which keep us in punishment energy and poverty consciousness. So my goal through this is to get them into prosperity consciousness.
Perfect. Well, we will have that provided in the show notes, and it's a perfect complement to my program of the 3 pillars of authenticity and alignment to abundance. So it really
Yes.
just wraps it all together nicely. And thank you so much for your conversation today. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your life story, as well as all of your insights to the listeners.
Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. Subscribe to my podcast now to ensure you never miss an episode filled with insights and wisdom. Head over to my YouTube channel where I share daily shorts and full podcast videos. Hit that subscribe button and be part of our growing community. Are you ready to take the next step in your spiritual journey? Don't miss out on the Women's Dream Empowerment Program, a unique opportunity for you to connect with your intuition, unlock your inner wisdom, and align with your higher self through dream work, personalized meditations, and healing sound frequencies. Finally, I want to hear from you. If you enjoyed this episode, please reach out. If you'd like your dream or awakening story featured on my show, submit it today. Your dreams have the power to inspire and enlighten other women on their journey. Visit womensdreamanalysis.com to find out more.